the last time I talked about Persona 5, it was well over a month ago. It wasn't like I really followed that game after it was released. I pretty much just talked about it a little bit, and it was that was it. That was it. I I think it was like August or September that I made my last video about Persona 5, and I decided to make this video because again, after Final Fantasy 15, I was like, well, okay, let's look at another RPG that was or JRPG that was supposed to be released this year. Not well, it was released, but it was released in Japan. Excuse me, but in the States and I think everywhere else, it's supposed to be released later on next year. I know in America it's supposed to be released in February, like February 14th. So we have that look. So we have that to look forward to. But this will have some spoilers in it. It won't have really a lot because it'll have some light spoilers. Just it'll have spoilers in it. It'll be a better analysis of the game than with Final Fantasy 15, which is like 28 days away, and really they haven't released anything about the story. I'll talk about the story briefly and the gameplay and some of the graphics in the game. But the first thing about the story is that the story seems interesting. It seems interesting because I have no idea what's going on in the story. And it pleased me that, again, kind of like Final Fantasy 15, that I don't really know a lot about the story. The reason why I don't know a lot about the story, it's because for America they've really just kept it quiet, and in Japan the game is already released. It's been released for almost a month, and it seems like the story is as good, if not better, than Persona 3. Maybe a little bit worse than Persona 4, which was an amazing game and it had a fantastic story. But it seems pretty unique in the sense that now you are stealing people's hearts, and this is where the spoiler comes in. You are now stealing people's hearts from them, and because you are stealing their hearts from them, you are taking away all of their malice and their anger and all of their evil, and you're accepting that as your own. And I thought that was very interesting because it doesn't seem like you're taking away their love or their happiness or whatever. You're just taking away all of the evilness in them. And if you remember Persona 4, you did similar things where you were trying to help people get over some of their really difficult struggles. Like for instance, Yosuke, he lost a close friend. Yukiko was worried that she hated the end, but she came to realize that she absolutely loved the end. Excuse me. And Kanji was coming to terms with his self, and etc. etc. The characters were they were like snowflakes. They were unique and once in a lifetime. And I like that. I like that all of the characters had something to bring to the table when it came to their depth. Because Yukiko wasn't the same as Chie, and Chie wasn't the same as Maria, and Kanji wasn't the same as Yosuke, and etc. etc. And it seems like with this game, it's the exact same thing, except I don't really know a lot about the characters. I don't even know the full on roster, but I know that it should be like 6 or 7 characters, maybe even larger than that. And that really seems interesting because usually there is this mascot for games. Like for Persona 4, it was Teddy. Now it's a cat that has a persona, like it's an actual cat. And the cat, and again, this is like a spoiler, can apparently turn into a bus, which seems very interesting. But the characters, they all seem very interesting, especially the main character. The story as it goes is that apparently you're captured by, or you're arrested by the police, and you are retelling the events of the previous year, in a flashback type of scenario, you going to the city of Tokyo and meeting your friends and planning all these heists and whatever. And it seems very interesting to me that that instead of going forward with the story, you're going backward. Also, as the protagonist, you have aggravated assault charges, which is very interesting because usually, if you remembered from any of the other games, Persona 3 and Persona 4, both of these games' characters were kind of like clean blank slates. Both of them, they didn't really talk about their past because their past was your own past. Excuse me. I think the only mention really of the main protagonist was that in Persona 4 was that both of his parents were busy and they were work, and you were from Tokyo and you went down to Inaba because both of your parents couldn't take care of you, but you were a good kid. It wasn't like you had aggravated assault charges. And this protagonist does, and I find that that's very interesting. I kind of want to see if that's taken to another place. And I think one of the best things about the Persona series is that their stories are very organic, kind of like The Witcher 3, because you have the option of advancing people's stories. You have the option of meeting new people, staying with old friends, of doing neither. You can do whatever you want, and I find that that's very interesting that they kept that specific dynamic, and it seems like they've improved upon it for Persona 5. Apparently, you can get to know a teacher, your friends that are obviously in your party, a waitress, and I think another schoolmate, which is very interesting to me because you didn't really get the option to meet, or not meet, but like interact positively with the teacher from Persona 4. Like, I think the only person that you could really interact with in Persona 4 that was a teacher was King Moron, and he was an asshole. So it's good to see that they've changed it up a little bit. But something interesting that hasn't really been discovered yet is, and for us who speak English and not Japanese, because the game isn't going to be released until like February, is that they don't really talk about who you're staying with in Tokyo. Is it because if you remember with Persona 3, it was that you were staying in an apartment with some schoolmates. In Persona 4, it was that you were staying with your uncle and your cousin. Oh, it's kind of like, it's a little bit bleak on who you're staying with, and I find that very interesting. Maybe it has something to do with your actual team. I kind of hope that it's like Persona 3, where you're staying with your friends and not necessarily your family. But if it's either way, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. But the gameplay looks very interesting. I do like how they've really gone with this Phantom Thief type of dynamic, where the whole point of combat now is to catch enemies off guard and to be very stealth-like. And because I remember the cover system, it looked kind of interesting, but now it's mostly meant to sneak up on people. I thought that that there were going to be shootouts and stuff like that, but you're pretty much supposed to sneak up on enemies, and usually they're wearing masks. You rip off the mask, and the combat starts. But the combat looks pretty similar to Persona 4. Apparently, the user interface is streamlined, so that way you can go through battles very quickly, which I do like. Even though the combat was pretty easy, especially if you had it on normal difficulty. On hard, it got a little bit harder, but very hard, it was just tedious, more or less. But I do like how they've streamlined the combat. The graphics look... they look okay. It's not necessarily anything to write home about. The anime cutscenes, they look fantastic. But the actual in-game graphics, they look okay. But that's not necessarily what I want to talk about. The dungeons are kind of just something that I don't think they've really done in a Persona game ever. The dungeons, they seem like platformers. Especially with some of the trailers and with some of the gameplay that's been released. They're more like platformers than these dungeon-esque levels where you just constantly go down, you constantly find the exit. Like, there's some elevation and verticality, and there's also some depth to these dungeons, or these heists, as they call it. And I find that very interesting. I shouldn't say interesting so much, but it's the only adjective that I can think of. I'm not going to say fabulous or whatever, but it's, to me, the reason why it's so interesting is because they haven't really done that before. They haven't really done that before, and it seems like they're pulling it off magnificently, because there are these shortcuts that you can take to get to the end of the dungeon, and there are these secrets that you can find in these dungeons. Not necessarily chests, but actual secret areas. And the dungeons, or these heists, they actually interact with you in both positive and negative ways. Like, you apparently can turn into rats in some of these areas of these dungeons. And it seems like they're castles too, because they have floors like the dungeons in Persona 4, but they're also like, they have outsides too. They have verticality to it, and they also have like an outside area that you need to penetrate to. Like, for instance, to enter the actual dungeon, you usually are jumping over a wall and, entering through a window or something like that. And it seems very interesting. Again, with interesting. But it seems better and well thought out than what they did in Persona 4 and Persona 3, which really, the actual dungeon crawling was the same. It was that, hey, you go in and you try and find the lowest floor or the highest floor in the dungeon, and that was pretty much it. In Tartarus, it was that you were ascending, and I think in Persona 4 it was that you were descending. And in this game, it's both. And the soundtrack for this game, Atlus does it again. Atlus does it again. Good Lord, it sounds fantastic. It sounds, you have to listen to it for yourself. It sounds like it was meant for Persona 5. And that's so weird to say, because really it's hard to it's hard to get these soundtracks down for these games, and it's kind of hard to compose these game soundtracks for specific moments in the game. And the theme song that's playing has this bass in it, with I think with a new singer, not one that they brought back from Persona 4, and she does a fantastic job with the theme song. And it always leaves me speechless how well the soundtracks coincide with the actual gameplay. That's just my opinion on it. But Persona 5 looks great. It looks great enough to actually be a contender and maybe beat Uncharted 4 as Game of the Year. I didn't think that there would have been any competition. I have to see more about Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 may be a good contender for Game of the Year, and I take Game of the Year pretty seriously. It's the best Game of the Year. It's kind of like the champion of video games for that specific year. I take it a little bit seriously. Or I take it pretty seriously. And it seems like Persona 5, Final Fantasy 15, and Uncharted 4 are probably the front runners here. I don't think there's really anything else that can be in the running for it. But I'll make a video about something that really annoyed me when I was researching both Persona 5 and Final Fantasy 15. It's about Polygon and some of its panels. Until then, this has been 24. Remember to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe for more. I'll see you next time.